We knew we wanted to reach as many St. Louisans as possible. And, we're not unique in that, our resources are limited, in terms of what kind of funding we have to execute a robust public engagement process. So we were thinking, with the resources we have, what's the biggest impact we could make? And this is maybe, the lowest threshold way to reach people.
Seems to be movement on the city's part on what to decide what to do with the money earned from suing Stan Kroenke and the NFL over the Rams bolt. For the better part of 2 years, only First Alert 4 Investigates has been tracking the stall and the secrecy on the more than $250 million. Well, tonight we have learned you are going to have a say on spending that money. The city has decided to team up with Citizen Lab. We looked them up, and they are a team of innovators, strategists, and technologists. Citizen Lab will use an online survey to ask for your thoughts on spending that money. Some questions will include what challenges you face living in the city, as well as priorities you think the city leaders should have.
Something else that we really wanted to make sure that we were doing with this process was capturing data. We don't want to make any decisions based on anecdote. We really want to see information bear out in numbers, so we can identify, what are people interested in, what are their needs, who are we hearing from the most, and where do we maybe need to reorient our process to engage with other St. Louisans. So we just needed something that that wasn't just like putting information out there. It was also something that would help us aggregate that, visualize it, and interpret it. Something that I wanted to be mindful of was, for this thing to be successful, it needed to be very easy for constituents to navigate and use, but it also had to be user-friendly for the administrative team. And so we just wanted to be mindful that, anything that was like really tedious or cumbersome, we'd probably see less adoption. We'd probably see people fall off in terms of usage. And we just didn't want that to be the hurdle. The other thing that really stood out to us as we were looking through this was just the type of onboarding support that we were going to get. We kind of knew that this thing wouldn't be successful if whatever platform we went with, if we were just kind of given a login and then left to our own devices. We really wanted to be able to have a point person that we could ask questions to. And it's also just nice to know that you're working with people who are willing to develop ideas with you. And that's something that I think Nina had mentioned early on in our conversations was, as we're using the platform, if we're running into obstacles or finding opportunities, that Citizen Lab is definitely a partner in that, and not just providing us with a suite of tools and then, walking away from it. It was like, oh, we can develop those tools further or add to it, or, depending on what we were looking for, the development team could maybe turn something around for us. And that felt exciting because, we kind of understood going into this, like, we're not going to know everything. And there are things that are going to come out through the process that we're going to need help with. So we just wanted to have a true partnership and not just we didn't want to just buy a product. This project in particular with the Ram settlement is a joint process between the Board of Aldermen. We're taking the lead on it, but also with the Comptroller's office and the Mayor's office. So as we were kind of moving towards a digital engagement strategy, we were just sharing that with, the Mayor's office and the Comptroller's office, and just letting them know we felt like this is really, this is a way where a pretty lean team with moderate resources or modest resources could have a big impact. And the thing that we all agreed on across all three offices was, for our city, these funds, they have great potential for changing what our city looks like in 30 years. They're used purposefully and with intention and community buy-in could really have an impact. So I think there was just a shared understanding that, like, for something like this, we need to do something different if we're going to try to truly understand what St. Louis residents want. Because kind of the typical kind of like old school method of public engagement really only reaches a handful of people. They serve their purpose, they have their place, and they are effective, but only to a degree. So kind of our thought was, we don't want to do either or. It kind of needs to be a both and situation. And to my knowledge, there really hasn't been, beyond like using social media, there hasn't been a strong like digital strategy. And social media is difficult because you're just competing against a lot of other content, and it's a lot of noise to filter out. So again, we're going to do public engagement through Citizen Lab and not do social media. It's like, really, we need to be doing both. It's really effective when you're asking a specific question. If you're asking the public like really broad, open-ended questions, I think you're kind of setting yourself up to be disappointed. It's really difficult to like have a blue sky conversation. But if you're having like if you're giving, folks like a clear prompt and a thinking framework to answer these questions with, it's like, like people will show up, So I think that's maybe something we would take into a conversation, is that like, have a specific use for the platform. Don't just do it just to do it. Like, I just want to commend my colleague Christina Garmendia, our policy director, on, she really wanted to make sure that, she understood that how we ask the questions is going to be really important. We want to get, sincere, genuine responses. We don't necessarily want to lead people towards an answer. The kickoff survey was really like around challenges that people face in their everyday lives. So it wasn't even asking them like, how do you want to use the money? It was more, what are things that are impacting your quality of life as a city resident? And then, from that we can start finding patterns, like, what are the majority of folks struggling with? Is it childcare? Is it low wages? Is it X, Y, or Z? So, we have to do things differently to show people that we're serious about rebuilding trust. And this is one of those ways. We really want this process, we've outlined it to be a year. By the end of the year, goal number one is to make sure we will know how we want to allocate the funds. But goal two will be, how much, have we made significant strides in rebuilding trust with the public through the process? That's how I think we're going to get more people engaged long term. And at the end of it, ultimately, the goal is like, we'll produce legislation that'll allocate the funding. But that'll really be informed by what the public is telling us throughout those different phases. Kind of the three ways that we did it, like for launch, was, we wanted to use social as a way to inform people that this was coming, and kind of use it as a way to like educate them about what it is, how it'll be used, how they can participate. We also have, kind of like, we're in a great position being a legislative body that, there are 14 lawmakers at the Board of Aldermen, so it was also, making sure that, what Christina did ahead of launch was she sat down and did kind of walkthroughs of the platform with every single lawmaker to show them, this is what the platform is, this is how we plan to use it for this process, this is how you could use it potentially in the future to engage with constituents in your ward, and really just like giving them like an onboarding, even though they don't necessarily have like login credentials. We really wanted just to show them like, hey, we think this is going to work. This is why we think it's going to work. We'd really, it's really important that you kind of like, as you go to town halls or send out your newsletter or are posting on social, whatever your social calendar looks like, talk to constituents about this engagement opportunity. But you essentially have, like 14 people who have each run their own campaign and understand how to connect with their own constituents. So then, so that was kind of the second piece. And then the third piece was, because the president has a strong background in activism and has been like very engaged at a community level in St. Louis, we just had like a very long list of community partners that, as soon as we knew we were ready to launch, we just, sent them a personal letter saying, we'd really appreciate it if you could help get this into your, into your networks. And so that's kind of where we started. So, kind of going to the press piece that you were asking for, we knew that like, for us, like the easiest way to get information out to the public is, is to work directly with the press. So we just, made sure that we set aside, we drafted a press release to answer like all the basic questions about the platform. But then we also made sure that we set aside time on the president's calendar to talk about it, to take interviews on it. Like our office, I think, is 7 people or 6 people. The communications department is me. So we just are trying to leverage like, the resources we do have. And it's kind of, again, goes back to like why we chose Citizen Lab is, we have limited resources. So whatever we pick needs to, like, we're trying to figure out what's going to have the greatest impact. Conversation is interesting because I feel like we're about to cross the threshold, like our first milestone in terms of like rebuilding trust with the community. We had a meeting on Monday night. The first agenda item really was to understand from the public's perspective, like what could we be doing better in the public engagement process around the use of these funds. Even though we were all distributed, we weren't all in the same place for the meeting. We were texting each other just saying like, wow, like people have really good ideas, so we need to make sure that like, as we're actually hearing from the public about like ways in which they want to be engaged, like what works best for them, that we, as best we can, address those things, so this week we're going to sit down and we're just like going through like the proposed ideas and kind of figuring out, okay, like in addition to what we're doing on online, here are some things that came up. What else? Like, how do we pull these things off? And like, I think that's our first opportunity to show people that we're listening and that we're going to act on what they have to say. It might not sound like fun advice, but I just think it's really important. Like, if you're gonna consider a digital strategy like this, to be sincere about it. Like, and it can't be a box checking exercise. Because I think if you're gonna ask people to participate, there really needs to be follow through on this side. So I think like my advice would be like, mean it. Like if you're gonna do it, like really mean it.